The medieval city of Florence, the birthplace of the Renaissance and one of the most important locations in the history of Western development. This impressive time period of architecture and design, which spanned the 14th and 15th century, later becoming known as the Renaissance, one of the most important and influential periods in art history and Western culture. Incredible artists flourished in Renaissance Florence. Some of these artists included the great Leonardo da Vinci, considered by some to be the ultimate Renaissance man, here with his drawing The Vitruvian Man, as well as other classics such as the Mona Lisa. Michelangelo, another great Renaissance artist and sculptor, known for his magnificent work David, which is adored by flocks of tourists daily. Another David, not known for its size but for its importance, was sculpted by another Renaissance artist, Donatello. Raphael, another Renaissance genius, is known for his sprawling artwork, The School of Athens. Other notable Renaissance artists include Botticelli and his Serene Birth of Venus, as well as Caravaggio and his gory David with the Head of Goliath. All of these artists were geniuses in their own right, but as a collective, they led the world out of the Dark Ages and into a new period of enlightenment, intellectualism, artistic development, and humanism. The reinvigorated and revalued ideals of humanism, taken from the time of the classical Greeks and Romans, were revitalized during the Renaissance period. The human body, the human form, the human mind, and human emotions were all carefully and gracefully artistically depicted during this time period. The Renaissance eventually faded away in the later years of the 16th century, but its impression and influence have lived on throughout the multiple different periods of art which have followed. Since the end of the Renaissance, new forms of art have been discovered and utilized, including the expressive medium of film, originally created in the late 19th century. This form of art made it much easier for artists to bring their ideas and creations to life in such a vivid and imaginative new manner. The world of film, like any art form before it, has evolved over the years. Silent movies turned into talkies with the advent of sound, black and white movies became Technicolor and VistaVision, and even 2D became three-dimensional. One common trait that the art of the Renaissance and the evolution of film have in common is their shared focus on the importance of humanism. The study of humanism during the Renaissance was the rebirth of an intellectual movement originally conducted by the ancient Greeks and Romans centuries previously. This revival witnessed a reignited interest in all things human. Renaissance-era humanists were particularly interested in recovering the cultures of the ancient Greeks and Romans in order to better understand their way of life and improve upon their own Renaissance style of living. Some of the ideals of this movement focused on the human form and body, as well as more intellectual traits, such as emotions and knowledge. In a time when the Church held most of the power over Florentine Italy, it was important for artists to be able to incorporate religious themes into their art. Because of this, many humanistic masterpieces are often set in fantastical settings or in religious context. For example, Michelangelo's David, as well as Donatello's David, are perfect models of the idealized human form set in a religious context. Botticelli's Birth of Venus is another example of the idealized human form, this time set in the fantastical world of ancient Roman gods, as 15th century humanists were connecting their world to the ones that came before. Much like how Renaissance artists and intellects were inspired and influenced by the way of the past, 21st century filmmakers are also drawing inspiration from their predecessors in order to put life, emotion, and feeling into their films. The common trait of Renaissance artists placing their humanistic artworks in spiritual, fantastical, or otherworldly settings is also often present in 21st century cinema. As Renaissance artists were more typical to feature mythological or spiritual settings, 21st century filmmakers are more commonly known to spin their humanistic tales in sci-fi or horror settings. There are many notable 21st century films in the sci-fi and fantasy genres which feature the ideals of humanism. One of these humanistic sci-fi films includes the 2021 movie After Yang, directed by South Korean-born American filmmaker Kogonada. The film follows a family on a futuristic Earth as they struggle with the loss of their adopted android son, Yang. By accessing Yang's hidden memories after his passing, his adoptive father, played by Colin Farrell, is able to understand his android son's desire and compassion for humanity. The film serves as an extremely effective and expressive example of what it means to be human and how the most insignificant aspects of life can be something beautiful. Yang's compassion for humanity in a futuristic sci-fi setting prove that humanistic ideals persist and survive in film as they do in the spiritual and mythical worlds of Renaissance artists. Other science fiction films which feature humanistic ideals include Spike Jonze's 2013 film Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix, which follows a lonely man in need of connection. The film depicts how even in a world of constant contact, human emotions such as the desire to belong and to be loved still persist as the main character must come to terms with what it means to love as a human. The 2004 film Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind also features these same ideals, as the main character, played by Jim Carrey, in a rather serious role, must decide whether or not to erase his former lover, played by Kate Winslet, from his memories, as he struggles between the freedom of mindlessness and the human struggle of sorrow and longing. Other sci-fi films, which concern what it means to be human and the desire of humanity in a sci-fi setting, include the 2016 film Arrival, as well as the 2017 Best Picture winner, The Shape of Water. Due to the power of the Catholic Church in Italy and in Europe as a whole during the time period, much of the art commissioned during the Renaissance by famous artists such as Michelangelo and Da Vinci had a religious influence or depicted a story or message from the Bible. Although the modern world is not as focused on the religious elements of art as it was in the 14th and 15th century, spiritually centered films are still released today, as many of the movies focus on the human struggle of faith and belief. The first example of a religiously centered humanistic film is the 2013 Polish Best Foreign Film winner, Ida. The film follows a young nun named Ida living in post-war Poland as she struggles with her faith and her commitment to her religion. The moving film depicts the everlasting human struggle with faith as Ida's devotion and sacrifice are constantly tested. The fragility of faith and humanity are present throughout the film, as are the religious iconography which bring us back to the religious and humanistic connection between the Renaissance and film. Other religiously centered, human-focused films include Martin Scorsese's epic 2016 film Silence, starring Adam Driver and Andrew Garfield, is based on a true story about 17th century priests who ventured to Japan in order to spread their religious beliefs. Paul Schrader's 2017 film First Reformed, starring Ethan Hawke, also includes some of the same religious traits. Ethan Hawke's character, much like the titular character in Ida and Andrew Garfield's priest in Silence, suffers through the humanistic struggle of a crisis of faith. In a world of climate change, mass murder, and uncertain futures, the small pastor priest must come to terms with his own fragile human nature and the emotions of emptiness and sorrow that plague him. Ida, Silence, and First Reformed are perfect examples of the modern connection between humanity and faith that is so prevalent in the masterpieces of Renaissance geniuses. Human identity and human spirit were integral aspects of Renaissance humanism, just as they are in 21st century film. A couple films that outline human identity include 2016's Best Picture winner, Moonlight, the story of a young man searching for identity in a troubled and dangerous environment. The 2013 Coen Brothers film, Inside Llewyn Davis, starring Oscar Isaac, also concerns identity and what it means to be human and the emotions and struggles that come with it. A few films that depict human spirit, human connections, and human perseverance include 2019's Last Black Man San Francisco, a long-told tale of belonging and being, given a modern setting. 2018's Cold War, a story of complicated human emotions and doomed love in the face of despair. And lastly, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, another story of the most human emotion, love, but in this case, forbidden love. Motherhood played an important role in the aspect of humanism of religion in the Renaissance, as it does in modern cinema with films such like 2019's widely popular Lady Bird, starring Saoirse Ronan, and 2016's 20th Century Women, a film that focuses on the human bonds that create a family. The ideals of human identity, spirit, and belonging are all infused in what it means to be human. Renaissance artists beautifully and gracefully depicted this, as their humanistic art brought them closer to themselves, as does 21st century cinema in its pursuit to tell the stories that make us who and what we are, human.